thank you for joining us today. And we're pleased to have Terry Plummer, Sussex County Master Gardener, to talk with us today about landscaping with native plants. So Terry, take it away.
Okay. Well, welcome to all of you, whoever is linked into this. And we're hoping that today you will learn why it's more important than ever to grow native plants. We'll give you some examples of how native plants have been used successfully in landscaping. And we'll show you a wide variety of the many species of beautiful native plants that will make your yard a welcoming place for humans and wildlife. There should also be several, at least 3 handouts that hopefully you have received. They're PDFs, you can print those out, and they're going to let you know where you can find native plants, where you can and purchase them, and the databases that you can use to help you learn more about native plants and their needs and their characteristics. And also there's a bibliography, since I used to be a librarian, of all the great books that are available through your library on native plants. It's the coming thing. It's what everyone is really interested in now, to try and keep our planet alive, growing, happy, with insects, birds, and flowers. Okay. I wanted to include this quote by Johan Rockström. He's the chief scientist at Conservation International. He's co-director of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. And here's what he has said. And I put this in light of what we're all going through today, this terrible pandemic. When you simultaneously hunt for wildlife and push development into natural ecosystems, destroying natural habitats, the natural balance of species collapses due to loss of top predators and other iconic species, leading to an abundance of more generalized species adapted to live in human-dominated habitats. These are rats, bats, and some primates, which together host 75% of all zoonotic viruses to date, and who can survive and multiply in destroyed human-dominated habitats. Well, we can't stop living, but we don't have to destroy the habitats for other plants and animals. So how did we get here? Here's our original mentality. The colonists came from England and other places in Europe, and this was the symbol of the aristocracy and of those who were a success and who had arrived, who had made it. It was a great green lawn, a great big house, and a great lot of everything. Well, we kind of kept adapting that. We had to have big houses if we could, and to have great green lawns, which have to get mowed every week, have to get fertilized all the time, need watering, and really don't add anything to the life of the planet. Okay, so Doug Tallamy, whom many of you may have heard of, he is a professor at the University of Delaware. This is his latest book, and what he has said, what is needed is nothing less than a cultural transformation rather than, well, I can't read it because of our pictures in here, so that we were independent. Instead of acting as though we're independent of nature, we need to behave a little more reverentially and respectfully toward nature, and that we're the product and beneficiaries of a vibrant natural world rather than the master. And that was always the mentality that people had. Well, everything was here for us. We could do whatever we wanted, and we were never going to run out of anything. Well, that's not the case anymore. So let's get real. What do we need to live? First of all, oxygen released into the air by trees. Trees hold on to the carbon dioxide and they release the oxygen. It takes 7 trees to provide enough oxygen for a person for a year. Food from plants and animals. That's where we get our food, and you can see how people are getting worked up because many of the food plants are closed. Foodstuffs are not available. Our master gardeners are growing a lot of extra vegetables to help food banks throughout the state. Water, purified in wetlands. It's the wetlands that purify all our water. And finally, a place to live. We all need the place to live. But plants and animals need the same things. So here's some facts. The population of the United States grows by about over 8,000 people a day. We've taken 2 million acres every year for development. The United States has 4 million miles of roads and over 40 million acres of lawn. That 40 million acres of lawn, that's the size of Ohio. We have turned 54% of lower 48 states into cities and suburbs, and we've taken 41% for agriculture. So basically, we've taken 95% of nature and made it unnatural. How is Delaware affected? Over 3,400 species of alien plants have invaded 100 million acres of the United States, and that is expected to double in the next 5 years. There may be plants like the butterfly bush that have a lot of butterflies on it, and you say, see, well, they're wonderful, that's not a native, but that plant really isn't doing anything except supplying some nectar for those butterflies. The insects really can't live on that. 40% of Delaware's plant species are extinct, and 41% of its forest birds no longer nest in the state. Why is that? Remember, we all need a place to live, and we all need food. So if the plants and the animals are extinct, if there aren't any insects, well, birds are going to go somewhere else. And we've really upset the biodiversity of our state. So what do you want from your garden? Well, nothing much, just a beautiful, low maintenance, sustainable place to play, eat, relax, and visit with friends and family. Remember this, no social distancing, no masks, and hopefully we will get back to this. Does it make a difference what you plant? It sure does. Here's a Cornus Kusa, which is a dogwood tree. It's beautiful. It comes from Asia, but it supports no insect herbivores. And then the native Cornus florida supports 117 species of moths and butterflies. It's also a beautiful tree. The golden rain tree, yes, it is a lovely, lovely street tree. It's from Asia and it supports no insects. An insect isn't going to go near this tree. And a native white oak, the Quercus alba, supports 532 species of caterpillars, all nutritious bird food. This is the all-you-can-eat bird cafe. And the thing about caterpillars is that they are very, very nutritious. They're full of protein. Actually, caterpillars have more protein pound for pound than steak does. So why do I need bugs and birds? Well, the insects pollinate the plants sequester carbon dioxide, the plants give off oxygen so we can breathe, birds eat the insects so there's not too many, insects eat insects to keep things in balance, and we get to enjoy the flowers. The losses are a sign that our own life support systems are failing. Biodiversity generates oxygen and clean water. It helps soils to be less prone to erosion, drought, and flooding, buffers extreme weather events like droughts and floods, and recycles mountains of garbage that we create. Also, it sucks the carbon out of the air and sequesters it in living plants, from the leaves right down to the roots. So why plant native? Well, add beauty to the landscape. and preserve our natural heritage, provide food and habitat for native wildlife, decrease the amount of water needed for landscape maintenance, and require very little long-term maintenance if they're properly planted and established. So the thing about the native plants is that the plants, the insects, the animals, over thousands of years, they have evolved to work with one another, to provide for one another. They've learned to live together and to add to one another and to keep everything on an even keel. And when that is upset, when we come in and we just scrape it all away and we just throw in a bunch of houses and there are no trees and there, we've taken away everything, then you've really done a job on yourself. You've destroyed their livelihood and you've destroyed their place for living. If you plant your plants in the right place, you'll find that native plants require a lot less care than ordinary plants. Yes, you're still going to have to weed. Yes, on dry days, you are going to have to water, but not as much as you would have if you had other plants. So let's take a look at some gardens. And we will go through the garden gate. And well, in back of these pictures, there's a hydrangea welcoming us. The first plant is a more formal setting. You can see they've gotten rid of a lot of the grass that they had to mow. They have dense plantings in here, so that reduces the number of weeds. But you're always going to have some weeds. But here you see hydrangeas, you see the rhododendron, which is native, you see some native grasses in here and native trees, and it's a very lovely setting. Here's a little more relaxed in the backyard. There's a trellis back here in front of this shed, and to my horror, I thought maybe it had Lonicera japonica, which is not a native honeysuckle. It's the invasive, and it's all over the place. But I discovered that it is Lonicera sempervirens, which is the native honeysuckle, which is beautiful. There's a red one, there's a coral colored one, and yes, there's a yellow one. And hummingbirds adore these plants. So again, you can see densely planted with a lot of natives in here and a place for birds to get a little drink. Here's a backyard that's a little more designed. You can see there's native trees in here. There's some native shrubs, Plethra. You can see there's echinacea through here. There's native grasses. They've made use of a lot of stone, so it fits in the same theme, in this outdoor theme with, looks like a hot tub here, a seating area, and then a place to eat. Really a lovely area. And here's foundation planting, again, densely planted with some Coreopsis. Here's Rudbeckia, Echinacea, different varieties. There's hydrangea in here, phlox down here. This may be some Helenium. And there's also some non-natives, because you can still have some of your non-natives. Here's a Japanese maple, which people adore. And but you have a wide variety, and the idea is to have a wide variety of plants to attract a wide variety of insects and birds. And not sure where everyone lives, but I know some people do live along streams and rivers down here. And here's a very nice planting along the border with native grasses, a variety of native grasses. You can see that in the fall, they're really beautiful. And of course, native trees. And here's another idea. uh, to help you avoid having to cut the grass all the time. This was an idea that was suggested to us by Dr. Barton, who taught us my class about turf. And she also taught the Department of Transportation that you don't have to cut it all down all the time. Just put in neat paths like here, and then people can see, okay, this was a decision that was made, there's a place to walk, it's clean and neat, and then the rest of the grass, let it grow. Here they've added some native plants. You can add some native flowers in there, and so you have a combination of neatness and your meadow, and it's a lovely look. But of course, everybody has different taste, but you can do an awful lot of things with native plants. I love the blue bench at the end of the walk. And here again, if you happen to have a yard and there's just a field on the other side, there's native grasses in here, there's monarda, there's echinacea, there's phlox, there's native grasses down here too. Another look. Here again, in a backyard, a lot of native plants have been put in here. You can see the Asclepias syriaca, which is called milkweed. When the colonists came over here, they brought a lot of their own seeds. And of course, they saw lots of plants that were already growing here. And a lot of them got their common names to include the word weed because they saw them all over the place. Well, of course, they saw them all over the place because that's what lived here. But that didn't mean they were of little value. And so if you hear of something that is this kind of weed or butterfly weed or whatever, it doesn't mean that it's a junky plant. A weed is basically a plant that you just don't like or is going to take over too much. So in here you have phlox, echinacea, you have some helenium back here, rudbeckia in the front, and again, a little bird bath for them to get a drink. So this is both for both butterflies and birds. So let's take a look at some of the native plants. Deciduous trees. The American beech is Fagus grandifolia, and this is a tree that people usually carve their names or their initials in, or you'll see a heart, you know, Pete loves Amy. And there is one in Kentucky that has killed a bar in 1840, D. Boone. And that tree is still in existence, and they're very proud of it. And another native here is the river birch, Betula nigra. It has that beautiful curling bark that comes off. It's true, it does drop some branches, very light ones. It's not a big deal. I have 3 of these planted in a triangle in my yard. And instead of worrying about cutting the grass in there, I just created a native garden. And it's just gotten more and more beautiful every year, that native garden, because I have a lot of ephemerals in it. Ephemerals are plants that bloom very early in the spring. They bloom before the trees have leaved out so that they get just enough light so that they can come to flower, and then they can set their seed. And by the time the trees have brought out all their leaves, that plant is finished for the season, and you'll see it again next spring. Okay, so we have fall color, the traditional red maple, which is gorgeous, a red oak, which is also beautiful in the fall. The evergreen, the eastern red cedar, you see all over the place. You see it on the sides of roads, but if it's shaped, if it's cared for, it's a wonderful tree. It has tons of blueberries on it, and the birds love this tree. I have one in my yard, and the birds adore this. Also the American holly, which is Delaware's native tree, and again, berries in the fall. And of course, there's all that holly for your holidays. the Virginia pine, and again, the eastern white pine. And you can tell the difference with their things. Finally, the tulip tree, which has beautiful fall color, beautiful spring flowers, and it grows pretty quickly. Sweet Bay Magnolia virginiana. And this one is a gorgeous tree. Its flowers are lovely, and it's a great tree. And of course, if you live on a pond or some area where there's a resident beaver, just know that beavers like this tree. And I had one take down my tree and bring it back to build his house. So just be warned. The shadbush or serviceberry, Amelanchier canadensis, is a wonderful tree. In the spring, beautiful flowers. In the fall, birds eat the berries. And when you see a name like Amelanchier canadensis or virginiana, those plants are usually native to the Northeast, to the Atlantic coast, and will do well here. So here's the Hydrangea arborescens. That's a native. And another one that I love, which is summer sweet, the Clethra alnifolia. And this one grows wild along the edge of the pond where I live. And the fragrance from the flowers is just gorgeous. And that's one of the things about the native plants. They haven't been hybridized, nothing's been done to them. So they haven't lost their fragrance. They haven't lost the wonderful qualities that they have just by being who they are. And these are my favorites, the native azaleas. You see that they don't have the intense color of the Asian azaleas that we ordinarily see at nurseries, but they have this wonderful open habit. And they also have wonderful fragrance, just delightful. And they'll bloom at different times. I have 3 different ones, and I couldn't be more pleased with them. They really are gorgeous. And of course, the insects love them. They're very happy here. This too is one of my favorite plants, shrubs, the dwarf fothergilla. And I think the nurseries have begun to hold this plant and to offer it. This is in the spring. Mine just finished flowering and has these beautiful little pom-poms of flowers, and the shrub is just filled with them. And then in the fall, just a delightful, delightful display of color that moves from yellow to brilliant orange and red. And it's just one of the most beautiful shrubs that you could have. And for winter color, red twig dogwood, Cornus sericea, and of course winterberry, which is delightful. It's a lovely green shrub, has very tiny white flowers, but then of course in the winter, just filled with these beautiful red berries. The birds will be very grateful to you, and it will also look great in your house. Now the asclepias. The asclepias have gotten a lot of good ink because these are the plants that the monarch butterfly caterpillar must have. They obtain a certain toxin from the leaves to protect themselves when they become butterflies. And just to show you how the plants will work together, what happens with the caterpillar is that it will crawl out on the leaf. The leaves of the milkweed have that milky sap, which of course is what gives it its name, that white sap. If insects start to eat that sap, it glues their mouth parts together permanently, and they're done. But what the monarch caterpillars have figured out is that they chew through the midrib of the leaf until the leaf collapses, and then it prevents that sap from going all the way to the end. So then the caterpillar crawls out and just starts eating that part of the leaf from the end. So if you see that happen, you know your caterpillars have been around. they're feeding themselves, getting all chubby and ready to go into their chrysalis and turn out to be a wonderful monarch butterfly. But you see, there are very many varieties of Asclepias throughout the country. The butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa, was named the perennial plant of the year a couple of years ago. Another one is pink milkweed, or Asclepias incarnata. And you see the different types of butterflies just taking advantage of the nectar from these Asclepias. The purpurascens is gorgeous. Hard to find, but it's a beautiful, beautiful plant. And the other thing that I've noticed from my milkweed is, again, the fragrance is just beautiful. I'll stand on the screen porch and I can smell it all the way out in the garden there. It's very, very lovely. So little bonuses. And of course, the plants do develop beautiful fragrances to attract the butterflies to them. Okay, here's another lovely one. Could be considered a shrub, Eastern Blue Star, Amsonia tabernaemontana. And you see the little flowers are true blue and they look like little stars. This is another lovely plant. Beard tongue. The penstemmons are always lovely. They are terrific in your garden. And the native penstemmon digitalis has these beautiful burgundy and green leaves, which adds to the coloring. Of course, there's many varieties of penstemmon and in different colors also. And the lobelias. The cardinalis, of course, is the absolute star of the show. And if you have ever seen the lobelia cardinalis, you'll know what I mean. It is such a brilliant color, a brilliant red. And at the edge of the pond where I live, it seems to bloom in different places every year. Last year, I had just a wonderfully huge stand of lobelia cardinalis, and it was in part shade, and it just glows down there in that part shade. And of course, the blue is a gorgeous one also. All right, blazing star, this liatris spicata. I'm always amazed at how creative plants are and how delightful they are. This plant reminds me of a teenager, and you can see how lovely it looks in the garden with a whole stand of them, with some native yarrow in the back, and looks like, okay, now I'm forgetting what it is. Goldenrod in the front. Agastache funiculum is anise hyssop. The butterflies go crazy over this. They just completely will cover this entire thing because they're so happy with it. You see how great it looks too with the Rudbeckia next to it. Just a beautiful display. So I wanted to add some ferns in here, Arcleus and Sibylus, and then a little more dramatic is the cinnamon fern. But there's many, many ferns, many native ferns. I'm just showing you a few of the plants that are available to you. The handouts will introduce you to plants that for Delaware and for the coast. So many with such variety that you're gonna be delighted. The panicum virgatum, the switchgrass, there are many varieties. This one is ruby ribbons. It's really beautiful, very dramatic looking. Another one that's dramatic and looks like a great big pink powder puff when it's in bloom is the pink muhly grass, Muhlenbergia capillaris. The reason I use the Latin names is because there are many common names for plants, for flowers that have been adapted over the years that people have picked up. In certain areas, they'll call it one thing, in another area, they'll call it something else. And, but in order for you to know exactly what it is, you want the Latin name for it. Okay, so for some more grasses, this isn't actually a grass, this is a rush, but I included it because it has a different texture. It's kind of delightful if you're in the designing mood. Now this one is pictured near the water. It likes to be near water. On the other hand, I had one that was growing around the foundation of my house, which had a lot of clay, which was what I was left with, and it grew fine. And that's another thing about the native plants. It's true that some want full sun. It's true that some need shade or part shade, but the plants are really very forgiving. They've been here a long time. They want to live. They want to survive. And they'll survive in a lot of variety of conditions. So that's another nice thing about them. And here, the reason I chose this Calamagrostis canadensis is because when the breeze blows this, it's just so lovely. It's so calming. I love this grass. And this again is one of my favorites. And this is a very easy grass to grow from seed. And I know because I've done it and I'm not that good at it. But I have quite a few plants because I have grown them from seed. This is what little bluestem looks like in the summer. It has that blue quality. And in the fall, then, it turns to this rosy color. It's really lovely. And then in winter, let it stay because you'll have this beautiful golden grass, and then just cut it back like at the end of winter, just before the spring. A great grass to have. Now I wanted to let you know about the Mount Cuba plant trials. If you haven't been to Mount Cuba up in Newcastle County, you should try to make it your business to get there. I know that they now have a tour online because of our conditions, but when things open up again, Mount Cuba is a place you should really put on your list for a day trip. And one of the things that they do, in addition to the hundreds and hundreds of acres of gorgeous plants that they have, one of the things that they do is research on native plants. Everything about Mount Cuba is about native plants. And they will take maybe 40 or 50 varieties of a single plant, the asters, heleniums, monardas, heucheras, Coreopsis, phlox, baptisia, there's many, many more. And they will do studies on them, they grow them, and then the results are, they have published, and you can get the booklets if you go up there for each of the plants, each of the species, or you can print them off from their website as PDFs. And they just give you a tremendous amount of information so you know which ones are going to grow well in your garden. It's just an invaluable service, and you will be delighted when you go there. So that link is included in your handouts.